The heat turning up on the Obama administration's intelligence officers after the release of the Mueller report showed no signs of collusion. GOP leadership now demanding answers on why the investigation was started in the first place and when and what the Obama team knew regarding Russia's interference in our 2016 election. Here's Senator Lindsey Graham.
Did they exonerate Clinton because they had a political bias? Did they ignore all the facts because if they indict her, they know she can't beat Trump and they wanted Trump to lose? Was the counterintelligence investigation a backdoor way of spying on Trump? There's real no evidence of working with Russia. They just used it as an excuse.
John Brennan, who was the head of the CIA at the time, went on to become one of Trump's most vocal critics and heavily pushed these collusion claims. He was asked about that yesterday.
I don't know if I received bad information, but I think I suspected that there was more than there actually was.
And here's former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper on whether he regrets attacking President Trump while also deflecting responsibility for the Russian interference.
I do have concerns about the president's unwillingness or inability or whatever to call out the Russian interference in the election. One of President Obama's objectives in tasking us to do that report on the Russian interference was to hand it off to the next administration. So the Trump administration would have that as a basis for taking action against Russia, which sort of hasn't happened in some ways.
Counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, blasting these Obama officials earlier today.
Those people at the DOJ and the FBI at the time, they have besmirched the good reputations and integrity of the 25 to 35,000 men and women who work in that department and do their jobs honorably. The Obama administration and the president himself knew that Russia was trying to interfere in our election and did nothing about it.
And when the president was asked earlier if he thought the decision to investigate made it all the way to the West Wing of the Obama White House, here's what he said.
I don't want to say that, but I think you know the answer.
All right, Jesse, do you know the answer?
Yes, it was Obama. You want anything else?
No, I think
kidding. I got this.
So deep state.
I got this. Listen,
Okay.
This was not an intelligence failure like a WMD or a 9/11. This was an intelligence plot that was foiled. What's so funny, Juan?
What, deep state? I think even Greg said deep state.
You know,
is that all
everybody was mocking the deep state phrase for the last 2 years, and now I'm totally vindicated.
How's that?
Because, Juan, there was no collusion.
Oh,
and anytime
my
you
God.
said the word deep state,
Wait
you
a
were
minute.
laughed at
Hang
for
on.
being a conspiracy
Hang on.
theorist.
But you-
Guess who the conspiracy theorist was?
Who?
Your side.
But let me say,
finish.
your guy's been cleared, so
Let
it
me
wasn't a
finish.
deep
Of
state.
course you want it to stop. Yeah, once he's cleared, now let's stop. Let's not look back, okay?
my
No,
gosh.
this is what it was. The Obama administration, they weren't trying to catch Russians interfering with the election. They were trying to catch Trump officials colluding with Russians to interfere with the election. This was a Democratic administration that used the CIA and the FBI to attack a Republican presidential campaign. It all started with Hillary and the dossier. As many as 4 Trump officials were illegally surveilled and contacted by the CIA. And then when she lost, they used this as an insurance policy to reverse the election results. Trump caught wind of it, fired Comey, and was totally vindicated. And the only way the media now can vindicate themselves if they start putting resources into actually investigating what went wrong instead of trying to, you know, brush it off and say, let's move on.
Let me tell you how deep state this deep state is. The ghost of Obama came out of the Lincoln bedroom, and he's the one that fired James Comey. He's the one that started this criminal investigation as opposed to the counterintelligence investigation.
The counterintelligence investigation began under Obama's watch.
Yes, that's
and it was
different.
Crooked from
That's
the jump.
different. And in other words, you wouldn't have had Mueller unless Trump fired Comey. That had nothing to do with any deep state, nothing to do with Obama.
And you wouldn't have had Comey investigating Trump if it wasn't for the dossier.
Oh,
cooked up by Hillary and laundered through the
That's
Obama
not
White House.
true.
Morgan, what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Oh, well, hopefully we can get that answer today. Listen, out of everybody at this table, I actually disagree with you slightly on that, this not being a 9/11 or a WMD failure from the intelligence community. I think it is of that level. And I speak as someone, I've been in the intelligence community since I was like 25 years old, I think 26 years old. And one of the things that you're taught as an analyst when you come in is what were the failures, the analytic failures that happened leading up to 9/11 and WMD, and how did we miss all of this? this. And what I have suspected for a long time is these leaders of the FBI and the CIA and the DNA, they forgot the basic analytic lessons that you learn as a junior analyst when there was definitely a lot of red flags there. For sure there was red flags because of what the Russians were doing. And it was the Russians that were trying to infiltrate. So they see all of this malign behavior from the Russians. They see a lot of red flags. And because of a lack of fully looking at the evidence, they jump to analytic conclusions about the president that I think are one of the most damaging things that any of us have ever seen in our lifetime. Let's not, sugarcoat this. They accuse the president of treason without having evidence to back it up. And as a person who has spent my life in the intelligence community, it is so damning to the men and women who are patriots, who go and try to do this work every day. And I think the stain that the American public has for the intelligence community because of these unethical political leaders can't be discounted.
My point was not that this wasn't a huge intelligence failure to the level of WMD or 9/11. I'm saying those were innocent mistakes and lapses. This was a devious plot hatched 2 years ago and now exposed. That's the difference.
No, it's not. If the country is
Greg in
under
here,
threat.
no matter what happens. Somebody like a Brennan.
Yes.
Should he be held to a higher standard of commentary than your run-of-the-mill pundit?
Yes.
He was a CIA director.
Yes.
And he said, "Oh, whoops."
How do you? It's because people believed they were believing an hallucination, and this is why as a deep state cynic who is no longer a deep state cynic, you have to understand that there were a group of people who felt that they were so right that they could actually be undercover, that they could do sneaky things because they were saving the world. In their heads, they were superheroes, but they were actually deep state, because they were doing the wrong thing, but they didn't think they were doing the wrong thing. And the long-term damage here, the big story is there's a lot of damage between people and nations because of this. There were people who expected nothing less than war over this, or taking out a president who might be removing a president because he might be a Russian agent. That's how far the hallucination got. That's why people, when they laugh at the deep state, it's because they thought that they were doing right. When you're wearing a black hat, you think you're wearing a white hat. That's essentially what's going on. But I have to, Jesse's right. The deep state existed. They just didn't know they were deep state.
But I don't get it. The president says that Mueller acted honorably. And Mueller...
He's not deep state.
Wait a minute. Mueller a moment ago was deep state. Now he's not deep state.
I never said that.
Who said he was
This is
deep
all
state?
about vindictive. Are you kidding? You missed what Trump had to say about Mueller? Mueller was involved with Comey. Comey was involved, and that was former FBI. This is such about... We've gone now from Trump doing a victory lap to vindictive actions by the right wing.
It's only Tuesday.
Yeah, we're not talking about Mueller. We're talking about Brennan,
Mueller's
Clapper,
off the hook now.
Comey, McCasey, Strzok.
Joining me now, Fox News senior political analyst Brit Hume. Brit, welcome. Good to have you with us tonight. It is stunning to watch how far out John Brennan, as the former CIA director, was willing to go before Mueller's report was finished.
Yeah, and every word he spoke during this whole period carried the sort of the implicit sense that he, as the former CIA chief, somebody was in the know, who had some special knowledge and who should be taken seriously. And boy, was he by certain news outlets, and it turns out he was utterly and completely wrong. From the get-go, he was wrong. He misread the whole situation, and he led thankfully not our news organization, but many others down a path toward a dead end. And that is where this has ended up. I'm glad to hear him say that he got it wrong, but it's too little too late in his case, in my view.
This is a tweet that he put out today. While the Trump campaign engagements with the Russians were highly inappropriate, we need to accept Special Counsel Mueller's finding that evidence of criminality was not established. And he did, as you say, Britt. He said he's one of the few who was speaking the way he was speaking, who says that he's glad to hear that the investigation cleared the American president of any of this kind of nefarious entanglement.
Yeah, a lot of other media have gone to their new corner to defend themselves now, and the new line seems to be hey, What did you want us to do? Not cover the story? It was a big story, and it was an important story, and we were just reporters covering the story. That's what Jeff Zucker was saying over at CNN. You heard that from Margaret Sullivan in the Washington Post and a number of others. And the trouble with it is that misses the entire point. Yes, there were some of the reporting that was done was bad. There were a number of bad stories. We had CNN got caught out a couple of times. We had the Daily Beast saying Mueller is telling us that he's got Trump on collusion. The list of bad stories is fairly long. But beyond that, it wasn't just that they were covering a story. It was the sheer volume of the coverage, the sheer weight given to it. Every little turn and detail in the story conveyed the unmistakable sense that this was going somewhere and it was going to unearth something very serious about our president and his campaign. That it was bound to turn out that way. You couldn't escape it. It was everywhere. It was all around you. And it wasn't just the news columns. It was the editorial pages. It was the commentators on television and in print. And they were nearly all pointing in the same direction in the mainstream media, and they got it wrong, completely wrong.
Here's Joe Scarborough, who is one of those who was listening to John Brennan, and it strikes me as you're talking, Britt, that he was a person of great authority. He was the former head of the CIA,
right?
And he was telling all of them every single day that with sort of a twinkle in his eye, look, I know what's going on here, folks. So you can come along this ride with me, and you will not be disappointed. Here's Joe Scarborough.
So save your breath, all right? We're not going to divert our eyes. This president lies more than any other president in the United States. We're not going to divert our eyes. Down the torpedoes, full steam ahead, follow the story where it leads us.
Well, I'm all for following the story where it leads you, as long as you're leading it in the right direction. It led, in this case, it led to a dead end. I don't know what he's so proud of and so defiant about. I mean, wasn't his program one of the ones which was leading the charge on this, where John Brennan had an audience many times? I think so. And when the White House put out that notice yesterday suggesting to producers that you not put some of these people who'd gotten it so wrong so often on all the time, I don't think we should take our booking instructions from the White House, but the list that the people that they mentioned there were people who had got it wrong and over again. And and it might not be a bad idea for journalists who are worried about what happened here to say, well, maybe we shouldn't listen to these people in the future. Maybe we shouldn't have them on so much. Not because the White House says it, but because of the record they composed.
There was a piece in the New York Times today by David Brooks, and he was saying that he felt like people like Beto O'Rourke and John Brennan owe the president a public apology. If you call someone a traitor and it turns out that you lacked evidence for that charge, then the only decent thing to do is apologize. You think he'll be waiting a long time?
Oh, I think, well, the rate this is going, I certainly think so. Although you're beginning to hear from certain seasoned politicians and even some liberal journals, the idea is, come on, folks, this is a dead horse. Stop beating it, particularly to Democratic politicians. Stop beating it. Move on to things that people care more about, because, you got an election coming up and you want to have something to run on beyond an investigation that turned up essentially nothing.